There are countless stories of bravery and service from our men and women in uniform. We're helping preserve these voices of valor for future generations by allowing them to tell their stories in their own words. In this episode, we have a conversation with retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Ed Hughes. Hughes spent more than 20 years doing everything from flying helicopters in Vietnam to jumping out of planes with the 82nd Airborne. He served from 1968 until 1992. Here's our conversation.
Well, I was born and raised in Newbern, so I'm a native New Bernian. Graduated Bern High School in 1966. Went off to college for 2 years, didn't do real well. Was fixing to get my draft notice, so I joined, got in the Army, and at those days, the only way to get into being an officer and flying without a four-year degree was in the Army. Okay. So I went through the Army, passed all the tests, and spent 24 years doing a little bit of everything from aviation in Vietnam to armor at Fort Hood, back to flying at Fort Rucker, jumping out of airplanes with the 82nd Airborne, in military intelligence with the 82nd 3rd Armored Division and 513th MI in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. And then I did a little bit of special ops in the Persian Gulf for 2 years. So I bounced around and did a lot.
Kind of tell me why you decided to join the military.
I was fixing to get my draft notice, and it was 1968, and if you went in on a draft notice, you were going to infantry and you were going straight to Vietnam as a grunt, and did not want to go to Vietnam as a grunt.
Okay, and you decided to be a pilot.
Yes, well, I had my first flight lesson when I was in high school, and I loved it.
You loved it so much.
And my daddy was a Marine fighter pilot in Korea.
So you started flying when you were around, what, 16, 17 years old?
Yeah, probably 17 when I took my first lesson.
So kind of tell me about, how was your time over there in Vietnam?
Well, you've probably heard it before. It goes from being bored out of your mind to stark raving terror. I mean, if you've read any of the books about Vietnam and the pilots, what they did, what we did, everything from simple ash and trash missions, we call it, picking up supplies, carrying them from one point to another, picking up a commander or a staff officer need to go from one fire base to another, doing combat assaults, which is taking infantry troops into a landing zone, which could be hot or cold, depending on what the enemy wanted to do. Night extractions for long-range recon teams, emergency medevacs. What else did we do? Sling loads. You name it, we did it. Because I was flying Huey, so I mean, you know, the old saying, you call, we haul. That's what we did.
And kind of talk to me about the aircraft you flew, the Huey.
Huey, UH-1, I flew the hotel model the most in Vietnam. Max gross weight's 9,500 pounds. You carry 4,000 pounds internal or external. You had about 1,400 pounds of gas, which was a little over 209 gallons, I think. Gave us 2.5 hours of flight time. We could do a lot in 2.5 hours. Had a 20-minute fuel light. When it came on, you better be close to a refueling spot.
And so I was reading online that, of course, sometimes flying during those times, during the weather, could be very challenging. So kind of talk to me about how it was flying, the weather conditions during that time.
It varied from clear blue in 22 to 0 because of the monsoons. And I've flown in everything from hovering up the side of a mountain to putting the rotor blades into the fog or the clouds so I could get high enough to kick supplies off to the guys on the ground, to flying up the Minlong Valley for 35 minutes in rain so hard you had to fly out of trim so you could see where you were going. And my co-pilot was brand new in country, and he looked at me with eyes big and round as the bottom of those water bottles, and he said, "Do we do this often?" I said, "Well, we do it when we have to.
Right.
But the guys in the back, they need ammo, they need food, and they need water, so we're going to do it." And then he said, "Well, what about the bad guys?" I said, "Well, going in, they're not going to think we're coming in because nobody's stupid enough to do this. But going out, when they know we're back there, we may get some fire." But,
and just for you, you're saying that the co-pilot, he was brand new, and
new.
His eyes were as big as these water bottles. And for you, how did you feel? Because you're teaching him, but you're the one flying through terror.
Anybody will tell you, you cannot think about the possibility that you're going to die. Because if you did, you would be frozen with fear and you would never get anything done. You're trained to do a job. You just do your job and do it the best you can, and whatever happens, happens.
So for you, I know you probably have had friends who you served with who are no longer here.
Correct.
And a lot of pilots, they did die during the Vietnam War. And you were one of those pilots. So talk to me about how you feel that you're actually sitting here talking with me today.
It's tough. My roommate from flight school died in Vietnam. The unit I was in, we lost one pilot and two crew chiefs when I was there. And I've lost other friends from OCS that were there. And when you think about it, you just don't.
It's just a part of you that you know it's there, but you rather not revisit
It's one of those little safes that's back in the back of your mind, but it's locked away.
And what would you tell to people in America today who may want to join the military? What would you say to them?
Do some research, find out what you want to do, find out which branch has got the best possibilities for you to do that, to achieve that goal, and then if nothing else, give it a try and see, because you can always go in and sign up for, I don't know what the minimum is these days, probably 4 years, 3 or 4 years. Go in and give them a couple years and see what it does. If nothing else, you're going to earn some GI Bill benefits, and hopefully you wouldn't get hurt, and you might get some VA benefits out of it. But you get a lot of discipline, and you grow up a lot.
So I know you know the saying, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And I know you want to keep the bad times locked away, but are there any good memories that you really do remember when you were serving?
When I returned?
When you were serving?
Oh, serving. Oh, absolutely. Being in command is one of the greatest privileges you can ever have. Being in charge of other people and leading them. I got to do it at Fort Hood with an armored company, Mech Armor. I got to do it in Germany with an aviation company. Got to do it at Fort Bragg with an aviation battalion that we actually were in combat for 2.5 years. So there's nothing like being in command. It's the greatest feeling in the world. And when you're out and you're still talking to people who are in your unit, and all they talk about is the good times, it's great.
So kind of talk to me about your life now after the military.
Well, I went to work for the state in 2000 and when? 1996. Worked for them for 14 years and retired again. And now I'm fully retired. I'm a member of the North Carolina Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association. We have 6 Vietnam vintage aircraft, all of which served in Vietnam, just like the pilots. We're all combat pilots. And we take those aircraft all over eastern United States. We've been as far west as Nashville, Tennessee, been as far north as Raceway in New York. We've been up into central Pennsylvania. We've been all over Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina, and all over North Carolina to educate the public and the kids, because nobody teaches anything about Vietnam anymore, and somebody's got to do it. And also to maintain the brotherhood. There's nothing like the brotherhood with your combat buddies.
And this is one of the reasons why, because, not a lot of people are still learning about the Vietnam War, so we're trying to preserve it, which is why we're talking to you. And you go ahead, you said tomorrow you're you're bringing your plane to the camp in Havelock to share with the children. Talk to me about that.
Well, this will be the second time I've done it. Wasn't last year, but I think the year before. And we'll go down there and do a brief presentation with each group of children, explain to them what type of aircraft that is and what its mission was, and try to entice them into doing their own research about aircraft. I mean, a simple question is, what was Newton's third law? And how does that third law relate to a helicopter?
Okay.
And you see the little question marks in their eyes. And they'll ask questions like, well, how did you navigate? What kind of GPS did you have? And you look at them and smile and go, in those days we didn't have a GPS. It was called a map and a finger. And you better know where you are or you're going to be in deep trouble. But yeah, it's a lot of fun because those are smart kids and they'll ask you some questions that'll make you stop and think.
And going back to that, piggybacking off of that, you have to know where you are. Kind of talk to me about How was that when you're flying in terror, but you need to know where you are to get to the troops and give them supplies and aid that they need?
Okay, well, one of the fortunate things about Vietnam is it was divided up into combat zones 1 through 4. I was in I Corps for the whole year. So most of my flying was done from Da Nang south to Duc Pho. So once you've been flying around there for a month or two, you pretty much knew all the major terrain features. You knew where all the major valleys were, where the rivers were. And if somebody called up and said, hey, I'm 2 miles west of the Quang Ngai or along the Quang Ngai River, you knew where they were or about. And then the procedures, of course, flying a Huey, we had an FM homing device where we could talk to them on an FM radio, and it would lead us pretty much right to them. And then the good old pop smoke. So the only bad part in Vietnam was flying at night, because you could go into a blacked out room. Mm-hmm. That's what it was like. It was as dark as anything mm-hmm. you've ever, no lights. Mm-hmm. There were no lights over there. Not in I Corps anyway. Well, around Da Nang there might have been, but not around Chu Lai. It was black.
It was black. So it says, what was your most vivid memory of your time in training school, and what was the best part and the worst part about it?
In training was learning how to do auto rotations.
Okay.
Turning the motor off at 1,000 feet and letting it glide to the ground, and then doing everything correctly so you could walk away from it. That was the most, I guess, was terrifying, yeah.
Did you master it?
Not until I came back from Vietnam and went to Fort Rucker as an instructor pilot. And I did that for almost 3 years, and in 3 years I probably did, at least 1,000 or more auto rotations. So after that you get pretty good. You get confident, okay. Not overconfident, but you get confident what your abilities are.
Mm-hmm. And for you, what is the thrill of flying for you?
Oh, wow. Well, just think about being up there in a helicopter, flying around, not in combat, mm-hmm. but you can fly low, you can fly slow, mm-hmm. and if the motor should quit, I know I can land that aircraft and you and I can walk away from it, okay, as long as there's an open field. It's just a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. Any aviator, fixed wing, rotary, it doesn't matter. They'll tell you it's a lot of fun. There's nothing like flying. Mm.
And you don't get scared or anything?
No.
It's just fun?
I don't.
Okay.
No, unless I'm sitting in the back of a big airplane and somebody else is flying.
Now talk to me about how, because you were in charge. How is it to be the one in charge to make sure all your men are doing what they're supposed to be doing?
Well, first of all, you got to know what you're doing. You got to know what you're talking about, and you've either got to know how to do what they're doing or be willing to learn to do what they're doing. Because if you don't do that, you'll never get their respect. Mm-hmm. And without the respect, you're not going to get anything done. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's great. And the friends you make are just unbelievable. The sergeant major for my unit at Fort Bragg has moved down here, and we're as close as any two brothers could be.
So the brotherhood too?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you still talk to many, is it just him, or are you still close with the rest of them?
On Facebook and internet to people almost every day. Mm-hmm.
And how is it? Now that's another thing, because social media wasn't a thing back then. Yeah. How is it now that you have social media to connect with people you once served with?
It's great. Absolutely great. Because you can keep up with them, what they're doing, what their families are doing, what their grandkids are doing. Mm-hmm. Where are you going to be next month? Can we get together here or there or whatever? Mm-hmm. It's great.
Is there anything else that you would like to say in the meantime?
Any prospective military person, I'd just say give it a try. I got in there in '68 and just fell in right in love with it, even though I had to go straight to Vietnam and stayed 24 years. Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, this will be in the Library of Congress, mm-hmm. so for people to listen to years from now. So, someone that hears this message, 50, 60, 70 years from now, what is something that you really want them to hear?
In my opinion, every American that gets out of high school should spend a minimum of 2 years in some kind of service to your country. If you're not willing to do that, how can you sit back and expect all the benefits that this country affords every individual? If you're willing to put in the work and the time and get some kind of education, you can go as high and as far as you want to go. Mm. So, look at me. High school, flunked out of college, retired as a lieutenant colonel. after 24 years. So, I mean, what else can be said?
So talk to me about, I talked to you about flying conditions. Talk to me about the living conditions while you had to be over there.
Okay, well, in Vietnam, again, I was lucky. I was not in the CAV. I was in a regular assault aviation company. We moved into Chulai in the spring of 1970, right after the Marine Fighter Squadron left and went to Da Nang. The Marine fighters lived in basically Quonset huts. The bottom half was plywood with a plywood floor, metal roof, had screens around the top. So we had a place we could live and stay dry. The worst part of Vietnam was the heat, and then in the monsoons it would be hot during the day, and at night you would freeze. And when I got there and went through the first monsoon season, I wrote my sister a letter who had my checkbook. I said, send me a electric blanket. And she wrote back and said, are you out of your mind? You're in Vietnam. I said, no, I'm not. When you get over here and it's 80 or 90 in the daytime and it drops down to 60 or 70 at night, it gets cold when it's wet. So send me an electric blanket. But the weather, I mean, it, like weather anywhere. One day it'd be clear blue and the next day you'd be cloudy. And then when the monsoon started, it'd be raining hard all day. So the missions would either get canceled or delayed, or you had to go do it and do it into bad weather. Thank God, knock on wood, I only went inadvertent IFR one time. And that was enough to convince me you don't want to go fly an IFR in a helicopter. It's not a lot of fun.
And at this time, did you have a family?
No. I was one of those people who was smart enough not to get married before I went to Vietnam. And came home in early July of '71, and by the 25th I was married and on my way to Fort Hood, Texas.
And you have kids now?
Oh yeah, I got 3 kids and 5 grandchildren.
Oh wow. Wow. So it seems like, you know, you're just enjoying the rest of your time?
Absolutely. I'm fully retired, and I retired early from the state so I could enjoy my grandkids and my kids before you start getting so old you can't do anything.
So here's an interesting question. It says, how has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
I knew that one was coming. I think, oh boy, it's a shame that more of our civilian leaders have not spent time in the military because they don't understand. And when you have, and I know the military works for the civilians, I understand that, but I would love to have been a fly on the wall when General Schwarzkopf went to President Bush, and President Bush said, I want you to go do the following. And I know Schwarzkopf, since he was raised in Vietnam as a young captain and a young major, probably said something along the lines of, I'll tell you what, boss, tell me what you want me to do, and then get the dickens out of the way and let me go do it. That's why that war only lasted, what, 24 hours, 36 hours? Instead of having a president sitting in the White House telling people in Vietnam what they could bomb and what they couldn't bomb. That's not the way you win a war. Is that enough without getting into too much trouble?
No, you're not going to get in any trouble at all. I'm trying to go and see if there's anything I did not ask you. Touched on that.
Well, the worst mission in Vietnam was in March of '71. We were all at the O Club, and we had all had at least one drink. And the announcer came over in a comment and said, all the members of the 116th return to your unit. And we all went, oh my heavens, what's up? So we went down there, and Major Hagwood, who retired as a 2-star general, very politely told us we were headed to Quang Tri for an operation called Lam Son 719. So that night, he was my co-pilot. We took a flight of 4 slicks, 4 UH-1s, and 2 gunships, headed north to Quang Tri. Got to Da Nang, it was dark, we refueled, took off, headed across the Hai Van Pass. Now picture this mountain range. To our west, it probably went up 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 feet, came right down to the coast, and there was a highway cut through there, Highway 1. We started across the pass. We went inadvertent IFR. We're in the clouds. Everybody got out of it but me. So we immediately, emergency procedures, pull in power and climb. So knowing the mountains on the left, we pulled in power and climbed, and we got up to about 7,000, 8,000 feet, turned the aircraft back around, headed back to Da Nang, squawking 7,700 on the transponder, which is an emergency, talking on guard, telling people we're IFR. Finally got hold of a radar controller, told me where I was, told me he would give us a ground control approach to land, and we were already been up there 2 hours, so we're getting close to getting bingo on fuel. I said, no. Look down, there's the runway, you could see it through the clouds. I said, just clear it between me and the ground, I'm gonna come down. And I did a high overhead approach and landed. But we finally got to Quang Tree, and that was the largest military assault with helicopters in the history of the Army. I mean, there were hundreds of them lined up from Khe Sanh into Laos and back again, ferrying armed troops in there. That's the one time in Vietnam I prayed from the minute I crossed that border until I got back again. I mean, never stopped. And they were shooting all kinds of stuff at us. So,
And you said this is the first time you prayed?
I mean, like that. I mean, knowing that where you're going because of what they were shooting at you. It was just not AK-47s and 30 millimeter, or not 30 millimeters, but machine guns and 51s. They had 27 millimeter, 37 millimeter things that when they hit an aircraft, the helicopter just disappeared. That's how big the guns were. So yeah, I mean, that was a scary situation the whole time.
And how do you feel looking back, knowing that you were one of the brave ones who actually took your advice and fought for your country?
I just did my job. I mean, I got drafted, and I was lucky enough to get what I wanted and was trained well. And then when I got to my unit in Vietnam, the warrant officer trained me even better, and was just lucky enough to do my job and do it right.
And you started when you were drafted when you were 21?
68, 20 years old.
20 years old. So what's going through your mind at that time? You're 20 years old and you're like, hey, I really love to fly.
We
I just joined.
We were young and invincible. It's not going to happen to me. It's going to happen to somebody else.
Wow.
And that's really the way you got to think about it.
Because you can't go into it thinking you're going to die, right?
Correct. If you were a police officer and you got in the car every day and all you could think about was, I'm going to die today, you couldn't do your job. You'd sit in the car and shake.
And that's the message that you preach to your men, that, hey, we can do this.
We can do it because we're going to train you to the point where I know you can do it.
And how extensive is training, or was training?
Well, when I went through, it was 8 months, 9 months. We did 4.5 at Fort Walters, Texas, for the initial training, and then you went to Fort Rucker for transitioning into the Huey and some combat training there, tactical training they called it.
Okay. And you say your parents are from here, you're from here, your parents are from here. Do you have any siblings?
Oh, yeah. Do I have siblings?
Yes.
How about 3 sisters and 3 brothers?
Did any of them serve as well?
No, I'm the only one.
Okay, you're the only one out of your brothers and sisters. What other jobs have you had in your lifetime before you joined the military?
Well, before the military, I started out at the Dairy Queen right here in Newsroom on Martin Luther King.
Okay.
That's where I started. I stopped there one day last year, and the young man was in there by himself. I said, I worked here when I was a kid. I said, I made 50 cents an hour. And it got deathly quiet.
Oh.
He said, you didn't even make $1? I said, no, but I could have all the ice cream I wanted. So I did Dairy Queen. I worked at Dixie Steel. I worked for Gaskin's Pulpwood for a while, and that convinced me to go back to school and study because that's hard work. Then in school, then got drafted and stayed in there for 24 years, and then came home and went to work for the state as a Veterans Employment Rep.
Well, that's good. That's good. 50 cents an hour, huh?
Yeah, and that was a lot of money in those days.
50 cents an hour.
But remember, you could go to a show, after the show, go to Hardee's and get you and your date a hamburger and a soda and not spend $20.
I know. Those were the good days because I never experienced them. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. If there's anything else you would like to say, anything that you think of to say?
Not really.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay.
You can answer it to her because of the camera.
Oh, okay.
Is there anything that you wish you knew before you went into the military?
Before I went into the military? Well, I think I was pretty well prepared for it because my daddy was a Marine. He had spent training there, and then when he came, when he left Corpus Christi en route to Cherry Point, he had orders to go join his squadron and go to the Pacific. En route to Cherry Point, they were told, they dropped the bomb, the war's over, y'all can do what you want to do. and he decided to get out, but he stayed here. So with him, with that Marine Corps mentality is what I grew up with. That kind of discipline and focus, such as if you're going to go to work for somebody, do the job right the first time because they're paying you to do it right, and that kind of thing. So I kind of knew what to expect in the military. And then the fun part, going through basic training, because I just got out of Virginia Tech at the Corps Cadets, and them yelling at me, I just look at them and smile. They go, "What's wrong with you?" Look, I just left professionals doing this for a whole year to a freshman in the Corps Cadets. You guys are novices as far as I can. So we had a good time. But yeah, I learned growing up primarily.
So here's another question. When you got, I know a lot of soldiers who have been in wars, they experience, medical conditions and PTSD when they get back from being in war. Did you have any experiences like that or symptoms when you got back from the war?
I'm a firm believer that anybody that's been in combat has got some degree of PTSD. I have not, and for me and people like me who stayed on active duty, I think our benefit was we were enmeshed in our comrades for however long we stayed on active duty. For me, it was 24 years. I mean, I've got buddies that were there the whole time. I've still got friends in D.C. that were my platoon leader in Vietnam. We still talk on a weekly basis. So we had that support group. And that could be one of the things that's wrong today. We send them somewhere, they go to combat, they come home, we let them out. Wrong answer, because the civilians don't understand. They just don't. So I had that support system. And you could see he was choking up about talking about people that lost and all. So all of us have it to a degree. It's just how bad you had it and what you actually saw.
So you think that people should have some kind of support group when they come home to
Absolutely.
talk about this?
Absolutely. And that's the key, the word you said, talk about it. Because I've talked to many a vet working at the Employment Security Commission, trying to help them find jobs, and ask them, "What did you do?" "Can't tell you." "Well, why not?" "Because I can't tell you." Well, you got to talk about it.
Right.
Because the more you think about it, the worse it gets. If we sit here and talk about it, then I'm letting you share some of that trauma, if you want to call it that I experienced, but it's lessening my load, sharing a little bit more. So here I've got 3 other people that would help carry some of that load. And of course, I'm not a psychologist, that's just personal view.
And that it is how, you can't talk about your experiences with everyone with everyone. So
Yeah.
you need someone similar who understands or who also went through the same thing for you to be able to open up and talk about it.
Well, that's true, or somebody that's just willing to listen. Because I've talked to some people that were looking right in the eye and said, you got paid too much while you're in the military and you didn't do anything to earn it. I'm going, how many birthdays, anniversaries, Christmases, Thanksgivings, how many times I've been shot at? I don't know, I think I don't do it.
And is that your response to them? Because some people, they aren't appreciative of what the military has done or is doing. So what is kind of your response to that, being a veteran?
Well, you're one of my pet peeves now. Of course, when the Vietnam vets came home, we got nothing. We were either spit on, avoided, or put away. And then when the guys came home from Desert Shield, Desert Storm, it was like the whole world was there to welcome them home. Personally, I think it was a guilty conscience. They finally realized what they did, and they're trying to make up for it, which is great. I think it's terrific, but that's my personal opinion.
All right, thank you so much.
You can get me in all kind of trouble, you know that, don't you? Because I'll tell you what I think.
I mean, hey, that's what we're here for. I mean, hey, this is going to be your voice. When people listen to you, it's your personal opinion. So I want you to be as honest as you can. And there was one more thing I was going to ask you. It slipped my mind right now. Why are you looking at it like that?
Because you're not old enough for things to slip your mind.
Oh my gosh!
I am. You're not.
Oh my! It was right there, but it'll come back to me.
Yeah.
But yes, this is your voice and it's your legacy that you're leaving behind. So we do want you to be honest and tell us what you think.
I've got no reason not to be honest. What are they going to do to me? Send me back to Vietnam?
Oh my gosh! So, do you think that Vietnam, in your opinion, of course, was one of the most significant wars?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then the other question I get is, or accusation is, y'all lost that war. And I go, we did? what kind of country is Vietnam now? Predominantly South Vietnam, but most of it. Well, it's communist, but it is a, now I've lost the right word.
So sorry.
What do? They've got businesses just like we do. They make money just like we do. Matter of fact, when I went to Belk's, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago to get some new everyday silver, stainless steel for my wife, ordered it, came in, guess where it was made? Vietnam. So they've come that way, and I tell people the minute we introduce them to the hamburger, a radio, and the TV, they were sunk. They are now us. They're just living under a different overall government that can't control them. So, yeah, we didn't lose that war. We actually won it. They just don't know it, or they do know it.
You are a funny man. It is great that, you know, you've seen all the things you have and you still have a great sense of humor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you can't laugh, what's the sense of living?
If you are a veteran or know of a veteran who has a story to tell, reach out to us in the comments below. Make sure to like and follow WCTI News 12 now for more stories like this, as well as the news of the day.